Welcome to another episode of the workshop of Speak Up Africa. My name is Wangeshi Karemi, and today I am hosting Dan Seda, and we are discussing the East Africa artist. So we're trying to clearly understand what is it about the East African artist, what is the state of the East African artist, what is the relationship and the affair between the East African artist and her government. And we're getting all of this from an artist from Kenya, Dan Aseda himself. So let's start off with a small introduction. Dan, why don't you take a minute to introduce yourself to the audience of Speak Up Africa? Let us know why we consider you as an artist and maybe a little bit about what you think the state of the East African artist is.
Hi. My name is Dan Aseda. I am a musician. I've been working as a musician for a long time, based here in Kenya. And my work, I've had an opportunity to work in all three countries, actually, the three big ones. I've never played in Rwanda, but I've played in the other three. And I have an opportunity to interact with artists across the region as well, in addition to just doing other work around the place. So this is my 20 or 21st year as a musician. I'm working in this space, and so I know it quite well.
Okay. Well, let's start with the state of the East African artist. All right. So I did a workshop, and we had a workshop with Rafinki East Africa, which is a poet club, and I met a lot of poets and mime artists and musicians as well. And when I asked them
Mhm.
what is the state of the East African artists, all of them had something to say in the line of "we are suffering." All of them
Yeah,
had something to say in the line of "money does not come by the end of the month, money is not enough." And because the poetry and the mime industry and the music industry, those three combined are not very popular in East Africa, especially mime. So we had the mime
mhm.
artist saying it's difficult to actually find the audience that understands my kind of art. And
Yeah.
I want to get it from you. What do you think is actually the state of the East African artist?
I mean, look, I think one of the things that as artists we're going to have to accept is that our art is going to have to become more and more commercially viable. I understand when an artist tells me that, hey, I'm not right now being able to make the money that I thought I would make. I completely understand. I also understand when an artist says that they're doing an art form that they're not finding a consistent market for. I also understand that. What I think is important for us to underline is that the market is a really challenging place for artists to work with, but the market also doesn't owe anybody anything. And so the challenge for all artists is to figure out ways um, in which you can find success in the market. This doesn't mean that sometimes you're always going to be successful. It just means that you always have to have a strategy or a plan for you to follow up and try and see if the market can listen to you and if you can find success there. I have to accept that a lot of people say that this is selling out, you know but it's important that we realize that there are some parts of this that are on the artist ourselves. We have to figure out ways to be more effective at marketing, at sales, and at conversion so that we can get some revenue for the art that we do, whatever art we do. That said, we have to accept that there are some structural issues that are affecting the practice of art in not only in Kenya but also in East Africa as a whole. Uh, what the most important is we have a long way to go in terms of growing copyright enforcement. We don't enforce it well enough in Kenya. We don't enforce it well enough in Tanzania, Uganda, in Burundi, in Rwanda. This is an area that really requires growth. In a manner of speaking, corporate enforcement is the one thing that must be dealt with by all the three governments. In a manner of speaking, your copyright is like a title deed. If your title deed is not secure, is not a reliable document, then all of business that is built on top of title deeds becomes insecure and unreliable. And so that's the same in the art sector. We have a long way to go, and that's something that I think the three governments, the five governments that well, actually Congo is in now. So every government that's in the East Africa region now needs to be thinking about specifically. The other thing I would add that is structural in nature is that institutional recognition of art is also quite, in my opinion, low, and it's something that we need to figure out together, because you cannot have an economic activity that is existing in your territory and you don't have institutional recognition. So this is important, because when you have institutional recognition, then you can do policy. You can do proper, not just policy in terms of writing, but you can do policy in terms of budgets, in terms of tax regime, in terms of investment in the sector in order to grow it. And so I would say those are the two biggest structural barriers, and I think they're the same across the region. But like I started, I think there's some work that we must do as artists ourselves to make ourselves ready. If today governments move and make corporate more effective and start investing in the sector, we need to be ready for that investment, for it to make sure that it can count for our own lives in whatever area of the practice that we are in. And actually, I can add one more. For music, seems to be like the art form that is kind of building itself into a business the best, but this doesn't mean that the other art forms cannot or should not. So I'd encourage all the other artists that are working in areas around art, whatever you're doing, the task for us is to find a way to create value and find a way to trade in that value. And that sometimes means that you separate work that you do just for business and work that you do for the art form, so that you separate these two things. Sometimes people feel like they don't want to put a price on their art, and I understand that 100%. I just think you should then do some other art also that you can put a price so that you can sell. And so if you're a visual artist, one of the things that people are trying and are being very successful with right now is there's art that you do that's for your exhibition once a year or once every 2 years, but then you also make coffee mugs, which you sell at a specific price, and that can help you with revenue that keeps you going day to day.
So thank you for that. I feel like it is significant for the artists that are listening to us and are going to be watching this later to actually understand that it's not just about what the government is doing or what the other sectors are doing towards your art. It's also about what you're doing towards your art. Are you willing to put in the extra work? Are you willing to actually set aside the business side of your art in order to make that money by the end of the month? Yes, we're trying, but it might be a bit of a hassle, but we definitely get there. Let me ask you, Aseda, do you think the government has, in both Uganda, Tanzania, and Kenya, do you think that the governments of these three countries have some notable steps taken towards improving the state of the East African artists? Do you think they've taken any measures whatsoever to improve the state of the East African artists?
Yeah, I think they have, but that doesn't mean to say they've done enough. So just to be clear, for instance, in the government of Kenya, in the last parliament, KJ moved a motion that amended the Kenya Copyright Bill, which was the first major series of amendments that bill has gone through since it was enacted in 2001. And so that's a big move, and we were all very excited that it happened. It helped us to move. But remember, we're already in 2002, 2023 is right next. In a month or two, in 2 months, we'll be there. And so we need a law that's not 20 years old. So again, we need to be going back to Parliament to make sure that we can get a law that is modern, because a lot has changed in the last 20 years in terms of copyright. In Uganda, there's also been some movement by the government, I know, to try and help the CMO world there. And of course, Tanzania, we have seen quite a lot of movement with all the different agencies of government that they do around art. But there are two critical things that I'd like to talk about in terms of government action in the art sector. One is that it's very slow and very belabored, and even the fastest governments are not catching up to where we are as an art sector, and they need to actually think about what they can do to get their action to be faster so that it's more effective. And then the second thing is that right now we are still looking at the arts lens very much as if from a morality lens. The governments are approaching art from a morality lens. In other words, they're trying to rein in the activities of artists as opposed to let the artists self-regulate. In all other sectors, we allow the players to self-regulate, but in the art sector, we are very forceful in trying to make it, you know, have us like we need to get quote unquote adults in the room. So you hear governments are like, oh, that kind of song is not allowed, but the person who you're talking to has never written a song in their life, and they should not be giving any rules about songwriting. In my opinion, this is important for us to consider, because when you're trying to build a sector, you have to take off the reins. So the idea right now should be, let this thing fly, let it go in as many directions as it can go, and then let the industry then develop its own capacity to regulate. In any case, the market will regulate itself. If something is bad, if something is not working, and you consider yourself a moral society, then the people won't buy it. And if the people are not buying it, then it won't survive. So there's no emergency of trying to teach people how to write good songs. Let the people write the songs, let the market decide what is good, and then we can move from there. So I would encourage governments to watoe handbrake, toe handbrake, allow us to run. Allow us to run, let us do this. And I think it will settle at a good place. And remember, in my opinion, tourism is a big economic activity in East Africa, but tourism is just the end product. The culture is a software that runs tourism. And so if you allow the cultural practitioners to be free, you can actually make your tourism sector grow much better. Wangeshi, are you there? I think I may have lost you. Well, if you're watching live, I've lost my host, but she'll be right back in a few seconds, I'm pretty sure.
Sorry, I do not know what just happened. For some reason, the network just decided to have a hitch of all this today. But regardless, I am so sorry.
No
Um,
worries.
so I left us at the government restructuring how they handle it. What way your handbrake? They should
Yes.
stop limiting artists to the kind of music that they should play, the kind of content that they should write outside there. Because by the time you come up with content, it's because you've recognized the market, because you've recognized an audience that might be willing to listen to that kind of content, and those kind
Yeah.
of restrictions should come out. Some of the artists that are doing quite well out there, the morality context is normally a bit shaky, but when the music goes outside there, for instance, when it is in music, it becomes quite popular. We have seen
Yeah.
some of the artists who draw. have some, those ones that do the nudity ones, the nude the nude drawings, are the ones that go, are the ones that sell. So it is about time that we call out the government and tell them stop giving us restrictions when it comes to art. Art is not to be restricted, and so that was very nice from you. So let me just ask you, what do you think is the relationship between the government of East Africa and her artists, particularly talking about stereotypes? So for the longest time, we have had this conversation of Manati. They say people with dreadlocks are treated like like they're treated differently from people with those dreadlocks, and you find a lot of stereotypes happening on grounds and things like that. As an artist with dreadlocks, can you tell us if the stereotype has changed over the period of time that you have been an artist, and exactly, is this stereotype still there, and are there other forms of stereotype that the people have towards artists who look and dress in a certain type of way?
Yeah, I mean, I have to be honest, I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about how I wear my hair. I got dreads so that I wouldn't think about it. And so I don't spend a lot of time doing that. But then what I can say, and what you're driving at, which is an important point, is that we have a lack of sector knowledge. In whenever people are dealing with the art sector, they come to try and teach us. So they always, people come to tell, oh, you should do this type of song, but that guy's never written a song. Oh, you should do this type of art, but that guy's never made art. They come to us thinking that they can teach us something or that they can improve something for us, but really they're just customers. And customers is the most valid and important voice, but it's also the lowest in knowledge, right? Like you use your phone, but you can't make your own phone. So you just know that whether you like a phone or not. And so this is something that our sector really struggles with, especially when it comes to dealing with government, because government always, the people who are in charge of art sectors are never art professionals. They tend to just give us once all the other positions were filled, they give us the guy who was left. Whoever was left is passed and made in charge of art. And so that's something that we need to do. Sector knowledge and sector skills and sector analysis is important. And once we do that, and I feel like the path needs to be followed is that we have to do that at an institutional level. Once we do it at an institutional level, it will come down to the normal society. But this is something that we have to work on. Part of it is us ourselves activating for it, but part of it is government taking leadership, excuse me, and being able to provide the necessary leadership, because they do this for land, they do this for land, they do this for technology, they do this for bankers, they do this for all other sectors, insurance, they do this even for insurance. They should do it for artists as well. Don't hire a person who doesn't know art to be in charge of art, for example. That's a first step. And then let's go from there and see how it works.
I completely agree with you. Most of the time, we find that the cabinet secretaries or the people that are being set to be in charge of art are very limited in their views and in the way they do their things. So it becomes a problem because we are unable to actually have the conversations of this is how I want to hold my hair, this is how I want to dress, this is how I want to structure my content. So yeah, that is how even stereotypes come. Because when the government is the person sitting on the seat in charge of artists looks down upon the people doing the art, then of course the society is going to follow suit. That is an obvious follow up, and I think it is time that people actually start applying for these positions, because we keep saying that we want the people who are there to be artists, and then the artists don't go for those positions. The artists are not the ones making legislations in parliament. The artist is just seated somewhere doing art and complaining. So I don't know. I feel like at this point I'm pointing a finger to the artist. But let me just get it from you, Asada. Do you think that we as artists in East Africa complain more than we take time to act?
It's a layered question, and I get why people phrase it in that way, but I don't agree with the phrasing. I think that the phrasing is incorrect. I think we can say things like, "Hey, let's do more to activate for this and that." We can also say, "Hey, let's organize to achieve this and that." I'm with all of that. I personally think that you should never be silent if you're in a position where you're suffering. So the more noise you make, the better, as far as I'm concerned. I think anybody who is complaining, power to them, keep complaining and never stop. The one thing I will add is that there haven't been very many spaces where you can collect the views and where you can kind of um, weaponize the views of artists for the to use in order to advocate for better conditions, better working conditions, or better um, recognition from the government. So that's the space in society that we can improve more. I don't have any problems with anybody complaining. I think that's okay. My thing is just if we can improve the way that we interface so that we can make our complaints have more legs and have a better impact, then I'll be game for that. The one thing that I can also add is that I think again, structurally, we haven't created the space for people to advocate for themselves in this way, and so that's something that we can improve on. Um, as a society and as government, uh, the people who are working in government, that is. And then finally, is that we also need to consider that things happen in the time that they are ready to happen. We cannot accelerate the movement of a group of people just because we want it accelerated. It has to come from them, and they have to believe that it's time for them to accelerate. And then when it's time for them to accelerate, then you'll see a different energy around whatever you're advocating for. And that's what uh, I would say is probably the way forward. If we can continue to encourage people to speak up, eventually you'll get a critical mass, and eventually you have a position that can now be pushed. But it's not something that I have no problem with anybody complaining, and I don't necessarily see complaints as a bad thing. I think complaining is good. I think you should never suffer in silence. So make as much noise as you can about whatever you care about. But like I say, if there's opportunities to organize, if there's opportunities to make your complaints have a greater impact, then let's take those as well.
Okay, yeah, activism should continue. It is only through activism that we actually learn the problems on the ground. So yeah, activism should continue. But even as
Yeah.
activism continues, people should take time to actually learn the art and take time to prioritize what they want. If you want money, it's a business. Find ways to ensure that you're getting the money and you're not just sitting down and blaming someone else because the money is not coming. All in all, thank you so much, Asada, for giving us the views on what you think the government can do better. I want to ask you, in the years that you have been an artist, what are the notable significant steps that the government of Kenya has taken to improve the industry? What are some of those notable steps? And even as you answer this, I want you to think about the COVID-19 funds that were set aside for art. What do you think about them? Tell us, did you personally benefit from them? And do you think it was a hoax? Because I've seen some artists calling it a hoax because the only way you are to benefit from that is if you sing about COVID-19 and how the government is taking measures towards it.
Mm.
So, have you seen notable differences in the years that you've been an artist? And also, finally, let us know, do you think that the COVID-19 funds set aside by the Kenyan government benefited the artists that they were meant to benefit?
Yeah, so again, two good questions. The first one is things that have changed. I think government investment in the arts is increasing. It's increasing. It's much slower than I would like, but I have to say that they are increasing their investment. There seems to be a greater recognition by government agencies about the work that we do, and that's good. Copyright awareness is increasing slowly. Even again, it's another area I'd like them to accelerate. I'm not saying these things are enough. I'm just saying I've seen increases. I've also seen that they passed the music bill in the last administration, and they passed. I forget the name of the music policy also passed. Not the music bill. They passed the music policy at cabinet in the last administration. So now there'll be a movement towards a music bill. I know that there's an arts policy that's been in the works. Maybe we can see that in this next administration. Those I would say are the biggest things. Government is procuring a lot of artists, I guess, musicians and filmmakers. There's been a greater recognition of musicians, filmmakers, and I would say to some extent fashion. So fashion practitioners, you see, former President Uhuru was very big on wearing locally made designs, those shirts. Those were made by a fashion practitioner that I know about, and so that's something that I think is kind of institutional awareness has grown. I don't know if we hope to see that it will filter through, but when the president wears such a shirt, you create a market for tailors to make shirts for other people, and so that's I think useful, and I hope that's something you can continue. During the election season, it was also a lot. We saw a lot of the presidential candidates dressing like that, and that was good. So there's hope. To your second question about the COVID-19 funds, I'd like to say two things. One is I didn't benefit. I didn't see the money, so I don't know where it was spent. I'm not qualified to tell you how it was spent. What I can say is that I think if I was running the department of art, I would have struggled to spend it because there's no formal way to recognize or formula to disburse these funds. So I don't know what they could have done because the government is just not ready. The government is just not ready to give that type of direct investment to the sector. When it's through banks, they give the money to, they have many instruments of supporting banks. They have an instrument of bailing out banks, bank, they have instruments for insurance, have instruments for all things to deal with banks, to deal with insurance, to deal with the roads. In the art sector, they've never developed the instrument, so they actually don't know what to do. So I would not be surprised if the money is just in the account because we don't know what to do with it either. Classification of art forms is not done. There's no recognition of businesses that are interacting in art form in the way that they would need to do in order to do it now. Kenyan artists don't have a tax code dedicated to them. We're lumped together like me as an artist, my tax rate is lumped together with a movie theater, a restaurant, a pub, and these are completely different types of businesses. So if you're trying to give us, let's say, a tax break, or trying to give us a tax discount, you're giving me plus a movie theater and plus a club. Ooh, and those are completely different types of businesses. And so it's hard. And so I don't know, I honestly don't know how to do it, but one of the things that I think they need to work on, which is to create the formal way for direct investment by government or by other entities into the sector. They don't have that. So I'm not surprised if they actually still have the money.
Yeah, thank you so much, Asada, for those comments. I think let's wind up on that note. It's important that those listening to us today understand that art industry is wide, number one. So if you're going to deal with the art industry, you need to actually break it down so you can ensure that everyone and every artist is actually catered for. And
Yeah.
also the artists, we need to actually prioritize ourselves. You need to go outside there knowing what your goal is and push and push for that goal. Now, I don't want to be the one to conglomerate your points, so I want you to give us a parting shot as we wind up. Talk to that artist that is listening to us today, and also talk to that legislator that is also listening to us in Uganda, in Tanzania, and also in Kenya. Talk to them, tell them this is what I think you should do. So we're calling this the Dan Aseda's monologue. To Manilizia, Dan, tell us what do you think the artist should do, and what do you think the legislator should do?
I think we, for artists, is just for us to continue to develop our art, and so that specifically, if we can diversify and make sure that we have some art that we can price, and that so that we can sell. The purpose of pricing something is to sell it. So please make art that you can sell, in addition to the art that is timeless and has no a price. And then the second thing for government is we know a lot about our own sector. We work in it. For instance, I've worked in it for 20 years now. We are the best place to be able to tell you what we need and what kind of help we need for our work. And so this is not something that you will create in your house. Please listen to us because we know what we need and we have done the necessary research and have the numbers to supply to you. Your work will be to represent us on the floor of the house, not necessarily to put words in our mouth.
Thank you so much, Dan Aseda. Today we were discussing the East African artist, and today we broke down the East African artist in terms of what is the state of the East African artist, what has the government done, what more can the government do, and we also talked about what can you as an artist do to improve the state of the East African artist. Go to www.speakup.africa.net. Please give us your views on the conversation that we're having on the East African artists. We want to hear what is the state of the East African artist according to you as an artist in Kenya, or someone that has interacted with the arts industry in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. We're waiting to hear from you. But as of today, that is all from my end. I will see you next time.